Although Ms. Harris is now officially free, his release has caused a storm that no one anticipated. Just when fans believed that the family's never-ending drama was over after his time behind bars, a new wave of chaos is taking over. Rumors are circulating, emotions are running high, insiders are whispering about shocking betrayals, unexpected confrontations, and a truth so explosive that it could tear everything apart, and the streets are ablaze with speculation. Earned, or was something shady going on behind the scenes? And what about Yandy? Her response to this news has left fans stunned. Some say she fought for this moment, while others say she never wanted him to return home. However, the real shocker is that NY sees himself as having been given clues that suggest prison changed him in ways that no one could have predicted, as well as what actually happened in the final hours before he left and why. Does it seem like this is just the beginning of something even bigger? If so, buckle up because we're going to go into all the amazing details of Ms. Harris' release. I promise you won't believe what comes next. It began like a bad dream, one of those nightmares that seem too real to be true. In the middle of the night, a phone started to ring, and news about Mendeecees Harris being in jail again turned everything upside down. Yandy Smith Harris couldn't believe she had stood by him through everything, sacrificed too much, and fought too hard. But now it was happening all over again. Her heart was racing as she heard the details, barely processing the words. There had to be a mistake. Mendeecees had assured her that he wouldn't be involved in anything that would endanger their family. But here they were, and within hours, social media was overflowing with speculative, fervent theories and angry. Some fans believed that he was innocent and that this was all a misunderstanding or a setup, while others weren't so sure. They recalled his past legal issues and the years he had already served. Was this just history repeating itself, or was there something much more sinister going on inside the jail? DC sat in silence, trying to figure out how he got there. He wasn't new to this life. He knew how the system operated, and he knew how quickly things happened. Could all fall apart, but this time something felt different. It wasn't just the chilly walls, the metal bars, or the stares from the other prisoners. There was a tension in the air that made his skin crawl, and people were staring at him as if they knew something he did. What's going on? And why do I feel like everyone in here knows something? I know that no one gave him a direct response, only knowing looks, cryptic remarks, and whispers that stopped the moment he. Yandy was in full crisis mode. She wasn't just sitting around crying. She was taking action. She hadn't been through this before, and she wasn't about to let Ems rot in a cell. She called lawyers for every favor she could think of and demanded answers. How did this happen? What were the charges? Why hadn't she left? Had a bad feeling that stuck in his stomach? Anticipated this, but the more she investigated, the stranger things became. There were holes in the story, missing details that didn't make sense, and some officials pretended not to even understand why he had been arrested. Documents were sealed, calls were interrupted, and all of a sudden it seemed as though she was up against an unseen force. Then came the first real shock, an anonymous message that was untraceable and contained only one sentence that men in DC shouldn't be reading. However, he isn't supposed to leave Yan's blood ram cold either. What did that even mean? Was someone attempting to silence him? Had he stumbled into something dangerous without even realizing it? She didn't know who sent the message, but one thing was certain, this wasn't just another court case. It was something much bigger. Back in jail, Mendeecees weren't just sitting around either. He was watching and listening to try to understand why things felt so strange. When a man he had never seen before sat down across from him in the cafeteria, didn't introduce himself, and forced him to look at Mendeecees for the first few seconds. He just ate slowly and deliberately before saying, "You don't belong here," without looking up. The guards were too quiet, and the prisoners were too cautious. It felt like he had been thrust into something completely outside of his comprehension. Supposedly to indicate that the man finally looked him in the eyes, and something in them made Mendeecees shudder. You're in the middle of something you don't understand, and if I were you, I would be praying for an early release. With that, the man got up and left, leaving me sitting there with my heart racing and my mind racing, wondering what the hell was going on. Then, just as abruptly as if he had been thrown into jail, things took a different turn late that night, long after the lights had gone out. Mendeecees were awakened by a guard, not just any guard, but one of the hubs who didn't just wander around at this hour unless something serious was going on. TC sat up, eyes narrowed, and the guard didn't respond. Instead, he simply motioned for him to follow. As he passed the cells and through the hallways, past the other prisoners who were watching from the shadows, he couldn't get rid of the feeling that this wasn't just. On a routine transfer, he was being taken somewhere for a reason. And at last they stopped in a small, dimly lit room where another man wearing a suit was waiting. This man definitely didn't belong in jail at this hour, so sit down, Mr. Harris, DCs. The man didn't move, and he smiled, but it was cold. That's not important. What matters is that you're leaving the heater. I blinked, and the man leaned forward a little. However, before you celebrate, realize that you owe someone. DC's stomach dropped, and he realized that something wasn't right. The man's smile widened, and he left the room, leaving me alone with a lot of questions and the depressing realization that his freedom wasn't truly freedom at all. Meanwhile, Yandy's phone rang outside, and she grabbed it breathlessly, expecting it to be another unanswered call. Instead, she heard the words she had been desperate to hear, that MDC was being released. And for a moment, she didn't react. She was frozen, unable to process what she had just heard. Then reality hit her, and she realized that no one had an explanation for why, after all the pushback, confusion, and obstacles, he was suddenly being released. Just as she was about to feel relief, her phone buzzed again, displaying another message exactly like the one before. He's coming home, but he's not safe. Yandy's breath caught in her throat. What the hell was going on? That was the question that would haunt them both as Mendeecees left the prison gates and entered a world that was suddenly far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Manny just left the prison gates when reality hit him hard. The flashing paparazzi cameras' lights and the deafening cries of. For a brief moment, he sat there staring out the window as the prison faded into the distance. But instead of feeling relief, he felt unease creeping into his chest from his phone that had been turned off for weeks. He kept his head down and walked straight towards the black SUV parked outside. The door swung open, and he slid into the back seat, exhaling deeply. Reporters and the oppressive crowd of onlookers made it clear that his release wasn't just personal, it was a public spectacle. Was now a ticking time bomb. As soon as he turned it on, he received a barrage of missed calls, texts, and social media mentions. People all over the world had been following his case, and now they were responding to his release. Some of the messages were encouraging, while others weren't so much. He scrolled through the chaos until he saw a text from Yandy that said, "We need to talk about something." Those 4 words sent him shivers, and he called her right away. "Baby, I'm just heading home." He paused, trying to maintain his composure, and then Yandy's voice was colder than he had anticipated. "Okay, I'll be here," he said. But that was it. No excitement, no relief, just that flat, unreadable response. He put his phone down, rubbing his hands together anxiously. He had imagined this moment so many times, coming home with Yandy and the kids again, but something to him it wouldn't be that simple. The car ride home felt longer than ever, and his driver sensed the tension but didn't. The only sound he could hear was the hum of the engine and the occasional thump from passing cars. His thoughts were racing. Had something happened while he was inside? Was Yandy upset about something, or was she simply overwhelmed? He hadn't been gone for years, but even a few weeks in jail could make all the difference. His heart was thumping in his chest as the car pulled up to the house, and he got out slowly, enjoying the familiar sight of home, but as he approached the door, he noticed. The curtains were drawn, and the house was unusually quiet. When he entered, Yandy was standing in the living room with her arms crossed, not smiling or hurrying into his arms. Her expression was unreadable, so she just stared at him. "Hey baby, I'm home," she said, and then there was silence. We need to talk, she said, swallowing hard. Okay, what's wrong? Yandy exhaled, shaking her head. What's wrong, MCs? I know it wasn't easy, but you don't know that she cut him off. MC took a step closer to Yandy, saying, I just got out. Can we just pretend like nothing happened? He scowled. What are you talking about? Yandy turned away, running a hand through her hair. You know how many people were in my ear telling me that I should move on, that I should leave you men. Her words made his stomach drop. You're not serious, she said. She turned back to him, her eyes full of something he couldn't quite place. I held it down for you, Mendeecees. I stood up for you when people said you would never leave. I took care of the kids, the house, everything. While I was doing all of that, I had to watch people drag my name. The men in our relationship, VCs, reached for her hands, but she pulled away. I know it was difficult. He said, his voice softer now, but I'm here, I'm home, and we can fix this. Yandy let out a bitter. I need to know the truth, Yandy said as she stared at him, her eyes searching for him. About the things I heard about the rumors. Mendeecees stiffened. What rumors? Yandy took a deep breath. I heard you laugh. That simple Mendeecees felt a pit in his stomach because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Then came the next bombshell. Facts about men that I didn't know. BC stay, his jaw tight, Kit said. Who's been saying that? Sheet matters whether it's true or not. NC shook his head, frustrated. Yandy, you know me. You know the man I am. Do I? She challenged. He stepped closer. Yes, you do. I would never lie to you. She looked at him for a long time. Then she took out her phone from a drawer, scrolled for a moment, and then turned the screen in his direction. Where did you get this? He asked in a low voice. Does it matter? Yandy shot back. I need you to be honest with me about VCs right now, he said, looking down at his blood-stained cold. On the screen, there was a message thread with a conversation between someone claiming to be connected to the past, a conversation that hinted at something Yandy had never known. He had just arrived home. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked at his phone, the call from the unknown number still echoing in his head, his hands balled into fists, his mind racing with the weight of what had just transpired. Rico's warning wasn't just a threat. It was a reminder that his past had never really let him go. He turned back to Yandy, who was standing with her arms crossed, her expression. His voice was low but firm, and Yandy let out a hollow laugh. Trust you, he said, because after everything Mendeecees, you disappeared into that prison, and now you're back acting like you can't control what I do, what I ask, or who I talk to. You expect me to just sit here and be quiet? This isn't about control. He couldn't read her eyes, and he could see the conflict in her eyes as the pain of betrayal battled against the love she still had for him. Yandy shook her head, saying, this is about keeping you safe from what Mendeecees, from your past, from the things you never told me, because if that's the case, then I should have never been in danger to begin with. Ed was exhausted, and every moment since leaving that prison felt like a battle against the outside world, his past, and now the very person he had wanted to return home to. You don't understand, Ed. Mumbled, then made me understand. Yandy shot back, telling me the truth. Men saw her, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths, and he could see the fire in her eyes and her determination. If he didn't tell her, she would continue to dig, and if she did, he swallowed hard back before I entered. I was involved in not only the things that got me locked up, but also other things involving people I believed to be my brothers, my friends, and promises to them, deals. And when I left the mess behind when I went to jail, Yandy's eyes narrowed. What kind of mess did MCs exhale? A deal that never got finished, money that never got delivered, and now those people think I owe them? Yandy's face twisted in disbelief. So all this time you were out here worrying about me, but in reality, they're after you. It's not just me, Yandy NBC's voice rose. It's you, our family, and if they can't reach me, they'll come for you. You to stop asking questions. Yandy stepped back, her arms encircling herself. You've been keeping secrets, creating enemies, and endangering all of us. And you didn't think I should know. I thought I was protecting you, Mink said, but now you've turned yourself into a target. Yandy laughed bitterly. Oh, so this is my fault. MC shook his head and walked towards her, saying, No, it's not your fault. It's mine, Yandy said, staring at him for a long time. He could see the struggle going on inside her head, the anger, hurt, and fear. Finally, she spoke, and before M could respond, a loud knock sounded through the house, and both of them froze. The knock came again, harder this time, and MC's heart pounded as he took out his phone to check the security camera on the front porch. His blood ran cold. It was Rico. He was standing at the door with his hands in his pockets and his face twisted in that same arrogant smirk that BC had seen too often before. Yandy saw his reaction right away, but the MBCs didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked towards the door, his steps heavy, and he took a deep breath before swinging it open. Hello, Mendeecees, Rico said in a low voice, and his jaw clenched. What do you want? Rico looked past him into the house and wanted to talk. Are you going to invite me in, or are we acting like animals here? DCS didn't move, so we're not doing anything. Whatever you came for, you can leave. Rico's smirk lightened a little, but you're mistaken. I came here to collect, and you know exactly what I mean. Yandy appeared behind M, her arms crossed. Rico's eyes brightened, and she must be the wife. When Mendeecees finally stepped forward to block Yandy's view, he said, Don't talk to her. Rico laughed. Relax, I'm just being friendly. His face darkened. But let's be honest, that's not why I'm here. You have business to handle, and if you don't, I don't need to tell you what happens next. BC's mind raced because he knew Rico wasn't bluffing. The man never showed up without a reason, and if he was standing at Mendeecees' doorstep, it meant it was. Even worse than he anticipated. You have 48 hours, Rico said in a casual but menacing tone. With that, he turned and disappeared back down the porch into the night, leaving MDC standing there with his fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms, Yandy by his side, her face now pale. Transpired, Mindy turned to face her. 2 days are allotted to fix the illegible face. This or everything will collapse.